Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Utility Incentive Programs, How to Get More Money Quickly and Easily. My name is Cynthia Selby, and I'm the Marketing Communications team here at Onset. I will give you a very brief introduction, and then I'll turn over the presentation to our speaker today, Brenden Millstein from Carbon Lighthouse. First, I'd like to share a little bit about Onset for those of you who don't know us. We are the company that makes the industry-leading HOBO data loggers used all over the world for building performance monitoring, environmental research, and water monitoring. We've been making data loggers since 1981, and we've sold a lot of them, over 2 million so far. We have 120 employees located here in Massachusetts on beautiful Cape Cod, where we design and assemble all of our products, and we have a global network of dealers that serve our customers around the world. The webinar will run for 1 hour today, and we will save time for questions at the end, so please type them into the questions section on your go-to control panel at any time. We are recording the webinar today, and I will send you a follow-up email within a few days that will have a link to the recording so you can review it at your convenience. And finally, please take a minute to complete the short evaluation, which will pop up after you close out of the webinar. Now I would like to introduce you to Brenden Millstein, the founder and CEO of Carbon Lighthouse, an energy firm that makes it profitable for commercial and industrial buildings to eliminate their carbon footprint. Carbon Lighthouse collects and analyzes thousands times more data per site than normally observed, which results in energy savings delivered at half the cost of market. Since launch in 2010, Carbon Lighthouse has completed 100-plus projects in California and Oregon, and clients include Tishman Speyer, the San Francisco Ballet, Squaw Valley Ski Resort, City of Venetia, and many others. Brenden obtained an MBA from the Graduate School of Business and an MS in Renewable Energy Engineering from Stanford University, and he holds a BA in Physics from Harvard. So welcome, Brenden, and thank you so much for your presentation today.
Hey, Cynthia. Thank you so much for the introduction. Today, we're going to talk about utilities, specifically energy efficiency programs. So we're going to talk about what utilities are thinking and how you can use that to get more incentives in less time. So hopefully, this will be a fun presentation that can result in more money for energy efficiency providers and buildings endeavoring to cut their energy use. If I could advance my slides, that would make this more helpful. Cool. Okay, so to really understand what utilities are thinking, we'll talk a little bit about history and how decision-making process is made on the back end. Generally speaking, the context you're working in as an efficiency professional or building owner matters quite a bit for getting money out of efficiency programs. We will eventually get to very concrete details as to which types of programs you should be applying to and how, but the history is actually very important. And again, I can't advance my slides. All right, here we go. So why efficiency programs exist at all is pretty simple, actually. So basically, energy started to get really expensive. There were all the oil shocks in the 70s and a bunch of regulators and environmentalists and ratepayer advocates, which is a fancy word for lobbyists, and basically a whole bunch of other people who were pretty frustrated with the high cost of energy, realized that energy efficiency was potentially a cheaper way of expanding our energy capacity. And as a result, utilities were mandated to purchase efficiency rather than or in addition to building new power plants. There are a lot of stakeholders in this, and there are a lot of laws, a lot of different regulators, and this results in a fairly complicated environment. So basically, efficiency programs are complicated as a result. So we'll try and boil this down a little bit. What you're looking at is pretty much just the efficiency programs and overview of California. But it's different by state and actually by utility. Also, word on questions, by the way, before we dive in too much. If you have them, feel free to type them in at every time. at any time. Some of them I'll save till the end, but I will scan my questions box at the end of each slide to make sure I can answer some of them promptly. Cool. So there's a brief list of stakeholders involved in energy efficiency programs, and this slide alone can explain a little bit why there are so many different programs and why they are so complicated. But all of these people and organizations have very different motivations, and we're going to talk about those. So the Public Utilities Commission is sort of the oversight for all utilities, and that does not just include energy. That includes cable and phones and water and TV and a whole bunch of other aspects. So we're not just talking about the electric grid when we talk about public utility commissions. There's the actual utility, which is split into a million different people within it, all of whom actually have pretty competing incentives and motivations themselves, as well as pretty complicated third-party interactions. There are ratepayers and ratepayer advocates. Those are actually very different. So a ratepayer is you or me or anyone who pays a utility bill or any company that pays a utility bill. And then the ratepayer advocates are specific lobbying groups that represent generally one individual sector. So there might be the industrial lobbying group or the commercial buildings lobbying group or the low-income ratepayer lobbying group. Environmentalists and environmental justice organizations are often aligned, but not always. So environmentalists don't want you to put the power plants anywhere, and environmental justice people don't want you to put the power plants in your disadvantaged communities. And a lot of times those line up, and sometimes they don't. Independent power producers are the fine folk who would like to build the power plants, and efficiency and demand response providers are companies like Carbon Lighthouse and a whole lot of yours. And no questions currently. Great. So let's start diving into everyone's motivations here. So the PUC, their goal is really to make, the Public Utilities Commission. So these are regulators. So these are appointed individuals, usually by the governor. Occasionally they are elected, but not always. They're usually appointed. And their goal is to make the utility operate as cheaply as possible without blackouts and while avoiding backlash, but really only backlash from vocal stakeholders. So if they're elected, they want to avoid backlash from people who would elect them. If they are appointed, they want to avoid backlash from organizations that would influence their reappointment. So this is a little bit cynical of a view. A lot of individual commissioners have personal environmental goals as well, or are there because they are deeply passionate about the electric grid and the public good. But generally, they want the grid to be reliable and cheap without getting too much vocal criticism. Utilities are much more complicated. So there are a lot of different people involved in utilities. So on the corporate side, and this is a lot of lawyers actually, basically want to comply with regulation and law with as little hassle as possible, but also get paid for all investments. So utilities are a very interesting animal. They are regulated monopolies. There's also municipal utilities, but today we'll focus on investor-owned utilities, which means they're for-profit, and utilities are guaranteed a profit. So any time they make an investment, they are guaranteed to make a return on that investment of 8 or 12%, unless they do something really, really bad. So a big goal for utilities is to comply and make sure they do get paid for all investments. Grid operators are sometimes actually the utility. They are usually separate organizations. And by usually, I mean by megawatt hours that get transferred around through the country, as opposed to number of players or anything like that. But grid operators basically want to avoid blackouts at all costs. Efficiency is harder to measure than building a new 1,000-amp transmission line, so generally they're a little more skeptical. They also don't particularly have an economic incentive in the game one way or another. Account managers are called a lot of different things. These are the people within utilities who are responsible to the big clients. So in PG&E, they're called customer relationship managers. In Con Edison in New York, they're called account executives. But account managers refers to the people in a utility who, if a really large account, like a manufacturing plant or a big hospital, has a problem, they have a personal point of contact they can call. And basically, the account manager wants to make their account happy by giving a lot of incentives, and then internally, they also have efficiency goals. So the utility requires the account managers to find projects that save a certain amount of kilowatt hours and therms and kilowatts. Efficiency program managers. So these are people within the utility that are running the program. So they're very different than account managers. And basically, they also have efficiency goals, and this is a group of people that is usually populated with people who care a great deal about the environment and about energy independence, because otherwise you don't go and run an efficiency program. Third-party program implementers. So a lot of utilities are required to work with third parties that implement programs. These can be cities or states. So New York City runs its own and there are no questions, which means I am either incredibly clear or incredibly boring. So I'll just assume it's clear and move on. All right, ratepayers, yet another group. So this is you and me, and we have pretty simple objectives. We want to pay as little for energy as we can, and ideally the utility will pay us for projects we already want to do, and we'd prefer to avoid blackouts. Again, this is frequently for ratepayer advocates. This is sector specific. So pulp plants might have a ratepayer group, and low income almost always has a ratepayer group. Cool. And again, environmentalists and environmental justice. These are different groups. So we've got rainbow collecting hippies on the left, and then we have anti-mercury people in the middle. And then we have a really nice picture of a house right next to a power plant and transmission. But basically, there's a lot of players with a lot of different incentives here. Independent power producers, let's put this in a little bit of context here. So these are the sort of the largest 10 people that build power plants or really operate power plants in the country. 50 gigawatts, which is what NRG has about. That's basically on the order of California's summer peak. New York is around 35 gigs. These companies are national, though. A lot of them are international, so this is not like within one state. They want to build and operate more power plants, so they advocate for why power plants are important and try and get increased funding and ease of process for building new plants and repowering old plants. And then lastly, we have efficiency and demand response providers. So these are companies that make business by reducing waste energy use in commercial or industrial or residential buildings. Typically, we want to maximize incentives for the types of projects we do, and we want to minimize hassle for that. And then there's actually a key dynamic here which ends up being important in the creation of efficiency programs, because this is a very negotiated process. But basically, good efficiency companies tend to want to prevent funding to bad ones. So the general theme here is our largest sales hurdle tends to be when someone has worked with an efficiency company that promised savings that weren't realized. So there's a sort of this dynamic within efficiency companies of all of the good efficiency companies that actually deliver things, want programs to be structured in a certain way that rewards that and prevents funding from other ones which cause clients not to want to do efficiency at all. So I've labeled us as good and given us a smiley face. Let me check for questions. I believe the PowerPoint presentation, okay, so question is, will this be available later? And yes, I believe the entire webinar is being recorded and will be available online. Cool. Okay, so here is a summary table of all of the different players involved. And again, the reason we are going through this exercise of understanding the landscape is that it's really important for understanding who you are talking to when you are doing an efficiency program. And if you know who you're talking to, it makes it a lot easier to get money. So that's why we're going through this again. But basically, there's a ton of different actors. And they all have very, very different motivations. Let's talk about the preferred efficiency estimate column for a moment. So this is a description as to whether or not that particular group of people tends to want estimates as on efficiency to be high, low, or accurate. So the Public Utility Commission, if theoretically these guys are here to help protect the public good, they should want these estimates to be accurate. Utility leadership totally depends on the structure of the utility and actually usually the fine details of that. So in California, we have decoupling, which is where the utilities do not get paid based on the total amount of energy saved. So usually that means they don't really care if efficiency estimates are high or low, so they may as well prefer accurate. In New York, in the early 2000s, there was what was called rate recovery, or cost recovery. So basically, the utilities were paid based on kilowatt hours they actually sold. So if they did energy efficiency, that directly cut the amount of revenue they had. And then the PUC in New York said, okay, well, if you lose $1 million because of efficiency, we'll give you $1,001,001, so you'll be incented to do it efficiency. That ends up being really dumb because what you actually want to do is pretend to do efficiency so that you get the $1,001 for your pretend efficiency and then also sell $1 million worth of power that you didn't actually cut. So the fine details of how utilities are structured really impact whether utilities want reported efficiency results to be higher, lower, or accurate. Grid operations, these are people who just want to avoid blackouts, so they want every estimate to be conservative. Account managers want to make their direct clients happy, and they want to meet their goals, so they tend to want efficiency estimates to be higher than actual. The people who run the programs would like that also. Third-party programs tend to get paid based on reported efficiency, so if those numbers go up, they're happy. So basically, there's a lot of people here who want efficiency estimates to be higher than reality, which is clearly pretty important and also good to have in the back of your mind when you're trying to apply to efficiency programs. So let's talk about how these efficiency programs are made after scanning for questions. Please get to the point of the title. That's an awesome question. We will be getting to the point of the title. There is no way to maximize your efficiency dollars without understanding very clearly who you are talking to and what their incentives are. So we're getting there, but there's no way for it to be clear. We're going to distill about 300 different efficiency programs into 2 very, very simple buckets. And to do that, you have to know who you're talking to. So we are getting there, I promise. Bear with me. And yes, again, everything will be available online. Cool. So Public Utilities Commission. These are the people who set the rules and theoretically evaluate and approve the programs. So step 1 is they generally tell a utility that they have to do energy efficiency. In California, they say you need to do efficiency first. So then the utilities come up with a plan to propose how they are going to do energy efficiency. This steps 1 and 2, by the way, that is a ridiculously huge legal battle that usually takes a year and is part of a rate case. So this is a very small portion of an incredibly large legal battle that occurs every 1 to 3 years depending on the state. So these programs are essentially, at least the high-level details, are negotiated in a state-run court. So that already should indicate that there's a lot of rules that come up just because of the court process. So as that negotiation, and it's called a rate case, happens, programs get approved or denied, and then the utilities either run those programs directly or get someone else to. At the end of sort of a program cycle, the utility directly hires an evaluation party to do third-party program evaluation. So the third-party program evaluation is basically a company or sometimes not-for-profit that comes in and looks at a ton of the projects and says, okay, the program reported it saved 100,000 gigawatt hours. We think it only saved 90, or we think it saved 120, type of thing. And they report these results back directly to the utility, which in turn reports them back to the PUC. And then the PUC either rewards or punishes the utility and starts over through the whole legal case. The PUC itself is influenced generally by the governor as well as the legislature. They tend to sign MOUs instead of direct laws, although a lot of times direct laws gets passed as well. And so there's just this huge number of stakeholders. In California, there's a separate sort of group called the Energy Commission, which all Cool. Okay. Lots of thanks for the backstory. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll keep on going with the backstory. So meet the commission. This is your commission. Key thing here is that 4 of these 5 folk, this is the California Commission, by the way, but this is at least time-wise representative of a lot of the other commissions. So 4 of these 5 folk have only been there since 2011. So institutional memory at the commission level, which is the decision makers, is extremely short. So these guys are new, and again, keep in mind they're not dealing just with energy. So their backgrounds here, communication and law, finance, you know, someone in a lot of other states might have a background in water or in cable. So these are 5 people who are responsible for regulating a huge number of fields. So they have staff, generally a lot of staff, and institutional memory is mostly with the staff, and then actual expertise is also mostly with the staff. So, you know, you can see here only a couple of these people have backgrounds in energy, and only one of them has more than 10 years with the commission. So staff is really, really important for decision making. And a lot of times staff is understaffed. So when I was in New York in the period of 4 years, I think, the commission staff was cut from 900 people to 450 people. And this is to regulate all of utilities, water, power, gas, cable, telephone, TV, a whole bunch of other stuff, you know, for a 20 million person state with one of the largest global economies in it. So it's tight decision making, and often the actual commissioners are not necessarily super informed on the individual decisions they're making. all of these decisions are evaluated based on, or let me rephrase, the decisions for energy and efficiency programs tend to be evaluated on what's called a total resource cost test. So this isn't a normal financial metric. This isn't, did it have a positive net present value or did it have a good rate of return? This is the original purpose of efficiency programs was to avoid building power plants. So the benefits of efficiency programs are compared to the cost of traditional power. And total resource cost tests are highly detailed and defined, and depending on state can be good or not. Checking for questions, and we are good. Cool. So how this evaluation process works is really, really critical to understanding how much money you are going to get for your individual efficiency project. So basically, the utility, and again, apologies for using PG&E, this is how it works in every state, actually, that has utilities that run efficiency programs. So generally speaking, the utility reports program savings to the commission, and then the commission awards a certain amount of money to the utility for program review. The utility directly hires the third-party program review. So you can imagine that there are a lot of companies offering to do program review independently, but they're sort of beholden to the utility anyways because that's who's hiring them. And then the way they do program review is it's really to avoid fraud. So basically, these third-party reviewers are visiting a statistical sample of representative projects. So if 1,000 new boilers have been installed in the utility, they will go and visit 80 of those. And basically, they are looking for not was the calculation of savings correct, but is the boiler there? So this is really just designed to prevent wholesale fraud of someone claiming they installed a boiler when they didn't. Except that it's not even at the project level. It's really to prevent the utility from claiming they got savings from a boiler that doesn't exist. Occasionally, they'll actually find extra stuff installed, and so that results in a spillover rate. So maybe the site only reported they installed 2 efficient boilers, but they actually installed 3. So that realization rate is then basically a percent of equipment that was claimed to be there that is there. That's reported back to the utility, which then multiplies their savings by that realization rate and reports it back to the PUC. So this is the first time we get to talk about how this impacts your actual project, which is what the utility cares about is that the actual equipment that you have documented to be installed is installed. They care about that 100 times more than they care about the actual savings calculations. So that is a really, really important thing to have in your head. If you're installing a variable frequency drive, you need to document it, take tons of pictures, and make sure it's there. They care about that a lot more than they care about your exact calculations of savings from the VFD. So that's very, very different than your direct customer. Or if you're a building, it's very different than what you care about. Let's look at quick questions here. Okay, does the utility get a guaranteed return of 10 to 12% for every investment they make, and what the definition is of investment and who it is guaranteed by the government? Okay, so this question is, does the utility get a guaranteed return on efficiency projects, and what does that guarantee mean? Most utilities, certainly most utilities that run efficiency programs, do get a guaranteed return on their investment in efficiency. If the average return given to the utility is 8 to 10% for everything, the return they typically get on efficiency programs is 10 to 12%. So it's a little bonus to induce utilities to do more efficiency and pay attention to it more than they would a regular transmission or distribution project. The guarantee is given by the PUC, so the Public Utility Commission, or Public Service Commission if you're in New York. Usually it's called the Public Utility Commission. That guarantee is given by the commission, and it it's highly varied by state and by commission what that actually means, but what it generally means is you utility, if your programs are verified, you get to multiply by 1.12 if you're getting a 12% return, all the money you spent on that, and add that to your rate base. So in other words, if you spent $100 million on programs, you would get to rate base increase the money you're collecting from your customers by $112 million. So that's how that works. And again, the devil is in the details with all of these, but I think that's enough detail for knowing how to get more money out of your incentive programs for now. We have another question here, which is there ever a verification of the actual energy calculations? Wouldn't they want to verify the savings, not only that equipment is installed? That's a great question. There is relatively slim verification of actual calculations on a per project level. So what utilities are looking for and what states are looking for is that across a portfolio at large, savings are more or less accurate. So most of the programs are set up so that as long as the savings made an honest mistake. Fraud means you paid someone to install equipment that isn't there. And we'll talk about this more in future slides. Cool. Okay. I think we talked through this mostly, but again, we're primarily looking for equipment being actually installed than we are looking for actual calculations. And keep in mind, by the way, this is program evaluation, not project evaluation. So we're starting high level, and then we'll get into actual project evaluation. But quick summary again, basically the utility aggregates all savings into all individual project savings into program savings. So the program might have saved 1 million kilowatt hours across 100 projects, and then the program reviewer will go visit a sample of those 100 projects. So if they go and visit 15 projects and determine that only 12 of those 15 projects were accurate, then they apply a 78% factor across the entire program. So instead of saving 1 million kilowatt hours, the utility would be forced to report that they had only saved 780,000 kilowatt hours. So that's how the programs get evaluated. And we're starting with, again, with programs, how they get evaluated, because that determines how the utility will then evaluate your project. So this is what the utility cares about. Question is your webinar going to cover how independent businesses, such as a small business like an apartment complex or a hotel, can get incentives from the utility company? Yes, we are getting to that very soon, in fact. Cool. So important things about program evaluation, and very shortly getting to what this means for you. Basically, programs are averaged across all customers, and the accuracy of any individual project is not super important. So if you are trying to stretch the limits on something, this should be a little clue that you probably can, as long as it's not equipment that's not being installed. The evaluation budget that a utility gets is fixed and limited from the commission. So they do a very heavy reliance on deemed savings, and they want to move fast. So the program evaluators get a set budget, and it doesn't increase if they need to go through really custom calculations. So program evaluators are a lot more interested in standard calculations rather than accurate, detailed ones. And again, evaluation means equipment is there, not that those calculations are super accurate. This seems like a really bad process. It's actually not so terrible if you do it right. So if you look at the results of efficiency programs, California has been extremely aggressive with efficiency programs, and its energy use per capita has stayed pretty flat while the rest of the country has increased pretty substantially. There's more than just efficiency programs that go into this. Manufacturing has largely fled the state. The best studies I've seen show that at least 25% of the flatness is attributable to efficiency programs. I haven't seen super detailed studies on this, but there are a number of factors that go into this. But the key thing here is that this process more or less works. So people, it's not like the entire country is crazy. Catching major fraud is apparently the most important part of ensuring that efficiency programs work. So that is where the public regulators and the protectors of the public trust are focused. And that's not a bad focus, by the way, even if it makes it annoying at an individual project level. So getting to the part everyone is here for. How does this impact us? So keeping your efficiency programs happy and the people you're interacting with within them is how you get more money faster. So remember that each party you're interacting with has a different goal. Your utility account manager, so that's not the program, efficiency program person, but if you are a hotel, you can call your utility and ask who your account manager is. Don't even mention efficiency, and they will tell you who your account manager is. That person is on your side. So the account manager, he or she, they have an internal goal for efficiency. They want to meet it. They want estimates to be high. They want to give out as much money as they can to make their clients happy, and you are their client. So your account manager, they want to move things through the bureaucracy for you. They want to fill out paperwork for you. They want to do anything they can to make you happy and give you a successful efficiency project. So step one for any small business or hotel, if you have an efficiency company you really like already, they should be in touch with your account manager already. If you don't have that company to work with or that consultant to work with, you can call your account manager directly and ask them what's available to you and who you should work with. Account managers aren't allowed to tell you individual company X is really good, but they all have a short list of the companies they know work pretty well and can give you those. And again, they will work with you to speed everything up as much as they can. So account managers are pretty cool. The next people you will be dealing with are the utility's in-house efficiency project manager. That is actually code for like the 5 different people within the utility who will be working on your project. But the efficiency project manager generally will consist of one actual engineer who is generally who you want to try and talk to as much as possible because ultimately they're the decision maker in the project. And then there will also be a contract manager and a bunch of other people involved. And they don't want to just push as much money as quickly as they can necessarily, like the general incentive for the account manager. But they kind of do too. Like they are also incented to move money. So an example here, when I first started in New York, our program had a $17 million budget, and there were 6 of us. And 2 years later, we had an $87 million budget, and there were 12 of us. So we were supposed to move, more than 4 times the amount of money with less than twice the number of people. So that really made us want to start going faster, and that program kept expanding in budget without an expansion in people. So a lot of times the efficiency people within the utility also want to give you money quickly. They, however, need to work with third-party reviewers, and those people are paid by the hour, and really they don't particularly have an incentive except they want to look good to the utility, which means they usually want to catch things. So when you get paid by the hour and you look good if you find a lot of problems, the third-party reviewer is generally who you should tread lightly around. Third-party efficiency provider, that means the utility is not running the program directly. So most states have this, some element of this anyway. So Vermont has Efficiency Vermont. Oregon has the Energy Trust of Oregon. New York State has NYSERDA at the state level, a bunch of programs at the city level. California has a million third-party programs like Lockheed. Those guys are more like your account manager. Their goal is to give you money as quickly as possible with as little trouble as possible. So generally speaking, if you can find a third-party efficiency program that works for you, that is a fast and easy way to get more incentives. I'm going to stop and look for questions real quick. Give me a minute. Ooh, okay. Okay, one of the questions is, how do you find out the specific account manager for a given utility? If you are a customer, this is usually pretty easy. Your utility bill often comes with a phone number on it, which if you call will have options you can press. If there's utilities listening to this, they'll probably be mildly annoyed by this comment, but generally just listening for anything on an automated phone answering system that will give you a real person is the way to go, even if that real person is not at all who you want to talk to. And then that real person at the utility usually has access to their database and can look up Okay, we're going to hold that one for the end. Which category is my company in? We are an energy efficiency provider. Sorry, I should have made that clear. So we do energy efficiency projects. We tend to get about 1,000 times more data than traditional energy efficiency companies, which is not actually for incentives. It lets us find a lot more opportunity than you can otherwise see, and it ends up cutting total project cost by 2 or 10x depending on the building type. But it also ends up being super helpful for applying for incentives as well. Okay, there's another question here, which I think is really good, actually, which is how can ESCOs, so specifically lighting retrofitters, but ESCOs really applies to any company that does efficiency projects, so like Carbon Lighthouse, stay current on energy rebates for efficiency programs at the building owner level. We will get into this in a little bit, but most programs can really be thought of in one or two ways, and one of two ways, either deemed savings or custom savings. And once you have that categorization, it's really, really easy to scan the program documentation. And so you can skip through 140 pages of program documentation and boil out what you need in like 5 minutes. And we'll see how to do that in another few slides here. For clarification, is the third-party efficiency provider the company that does the implementation? Usually not. So the third-party efficiency provider is the company that oversees the program. So this is Lockheed Martin, and while actually it usually is Lockheed Martin, but while they do have engineers in-house, that's actually not who's doing the implementation. It is usually local contractors that do the implementation. And so the way some of those programs are set up is they already have relationships with local contractors, and they usually get a deal. Other programs are set up so you can use whatever local contractor you want. But usually the actual third-party efficiency program company is not doing the physical install in your building. That's going to be enough questions for now. Let's move on. Cool. Okay, so account managers. So we talked about this a little bit, but basically their goal is to hand out as much money as they can, but they also need to not get caught if something goes bad. So you need to make sure nothing's going to go bad. So if you are an efficiency company or you are a building, generally account managers struggle with meeting their kilowatt goals and their therm goals. So kilowatt goals are different than kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is annual electric savings. Kilowatt is just energy reduced just during peak time. So like the hottest summer days are noon to 6 from May through October. So if you are doing anything that reduces energy use then, you will make your account manager very happy. By the way, most lighting projects do that with the exception of occupancy. But any sort of, replacing light bulbs with other light bulbs or light fixtures with other fixtures will bring in kW savings. The thing is, though, as much as they do want to give you money, they can't just lie. So you need to give them enough documentation and data so that they can stand by anything they're saying. So the way to do that is to give cut sheets. So if you're installing a bunch of lights, give the technical documentation of every light and ballast you've installed. And you can usually get your contractor, and not usually, you can have your contractor give you that. And take tons and tons of pictures. So pictures from before the project and pictures from after the project. So that's what your account manager is looking for. Your in-house efficiency program generally is also looking to meet its goals. So efficiency programs have goals. We're going to try and save 50 megawatts off peak or something like that. So they also want to meet those goals, but they also want to avoid free riders. So a free rider is someone who is going to do the project anyways. So basically, you want to talk to your program well before you start doing your project. If you've already done the project, it might be too late. So if you're thinking about doing a project, that's the right time to reach out to your account manager and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing X. What should I do? And again, programs also struggle with kilowatts and therms as opposed to annual electric. They like cut sheets. They like simple calculations based on lots of data. So some programs will have their own calculation tools you can use. Others don't. But at the end of the day, someone needs to review your calculations. So if you can make those very clear and concise and back them up with lots of data, that makes an efficiency program's job much, much easier. And also lots and lots of pictures. And generally speaking, you want to emphasize that your project would not happen without the program. This is probably going to have spurred a lot of questions and comments. Let me check real quick. Okay, not so bad. Great. Let's take a few of these. Oh, what if it's new construction and you go with efficient lights? New construction usually has programs too. They are generally arranged by how much you are beating code as opposed to how much you are beating what was already there, which is reasonable because there is nothing already there. Code in most states usually references ASHRAE 90.1. As the standard. So it depends on which state, depends on what year, whether it's 2001 or 2004 or 2007, but generally speaking, the code you are trying to beat is ASHRAE 90.1. Even something stringent like Title 24 in California has a lot of references to ASHRAE 90.1. So whether it's new construction and you're beating code as a baseline, or you're working in an existing building, then you're just beating whatever the baseline was as a baseline. Either way, that's how you want to show savings, is through cut sheets and simple calculations based on lots of data. And new construction usually has incentives. Third-party engineering review. So these are not people from within the utility, usually. Some utilities have enough resources to have their own teams of engineers that review projects. But usually they let the private sector do this. So even large utilities that do have those resources usually run competitive bids to get third-party engineering firms to do this. So their goals are very, very different. They want to catch bad guys. They want to make sure that there aren't free riders. They want to make sure people aren't lying. Like this is the bad cop. So a lot of in-house program people, so at the utility, really do care about the environment and energy, so they have these goals too. But the third-party engineering firm, these are the people who it is explicitly their job to do this. And again, how you make them happy is you give a lot of data and give well-explained calculations, and cut sheets are the technical documentation, and then tons and tons and tons of pictures. And they'll often just tell you what they need. And you should always ask. So their goal, again, is just to try and make sure that people aren't sneaking stuff through. And so this is really the meat of where individual projects are evaluated. Let me stop for questions real quick. Okay, cool. A bunch of good questions. So let's take the first one. Can you apply too far in advance? Yeah, best would be doing design drawings and documents, or when in the process should you apply. This depends a little bit on the program. Generally, you can't apply too far in advance. The danger of applying too far in advance 200 projects open, because they all take 16 months. But generally speaking, calling the account manager at the utility for literally 5 minutes and saying, hey, we're thinking of doing X, here's where we are, they can give you guidance as to when you should be applying. And that, if you know who to talk to, is a 5-minute conversation. Next question. This might be complicated, but how does the utility measure the savings achieved? Do they try and normalize year-to-year energy use for weather, customers, etc.? So changes they see in demand are from efficiency projects and not a mild summer. This is a great question, and the answer is usually no, they don't do that. So there's two main ways utilities do calculate savings. One is from a deemed savings database. So this is saying, I am doing a relatively simple project, like replacing an incandescent light bulb with a CFL, rather than measuring the run hours for that light bulb. Let's just assume on average it's 2,000 hours for the year, and that's accurate across 10,000 buildings. And with deemed savings, there's not really any measurement and verification afterwards. It's just making sure that equipment was actually installed. With custom incentive programs where you give specific custom calculations, there also is usually not real measurement and verification afterwards. The way that usually works is the program says, okay, we'll give you 10 cents per kilowatt hour you save, and you, the building owner, or you, the efficiency company doing the project, provide those calculations, and those calculations get reviewed by a third-party review firm. The quality of those firms varies a lot. Some of them are really excellent. Some of them are not quite as great. But it's pretty rare for a utility program to actually get interval meter data for, say, a year or 5 after a project is done, and then run regressions on that. I think the industry is moving a little bit that way, but that's pretty rare. I think in the 350 projects I did in New York, I think I got meter data and ran regressions on it probably 20 times. So we're talking well less than 10%, and also I was probably the dorkiest person to run an efficiency program, or at least up there. Let's see, more questions here. So the next question is, if energy savings calculations are done for a custom project and M&V shows less savings because of other changes within production, are incentives reduced or revoked? This is a good question. So at the time you're applying, while you're going over the calculations of savings with the third-party engineering company or with the utility directly, the incentive could be cut a lot. But generally speaking, once those savings are agreed on, the project is approved to move forward. And at that point, as long as you install the equipment that you claimed you were going to install, the savings aren't usually cut. Again, it's really rare for utilities to look at actual bill savings for 12 months or 24 months out and change the incentives based on that. It happens rarely, so I don't want to say it's never, but usually once you agree on the calculations ahead of time, that's how savings move forward. Cool. We will be done. Oh, wow. We're later than usual, actually. Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward. And yes, in response, that is typical for all utilities, not just California. So once you agree on savings, it is very, very rare to actually go through interval meter data after the fact and adjust incentives. Third-party efficiency providers, these are similar to utility program providers, except that it's a third-party company, so they don't have any of the conflicts of if they do more efficiency, they make less money because they're selling less power. Generally speaking, for a third-party efficiency program, they just want to get as many energy savings as they possibly can and not get nailed in an audit. Cool. So two types of programs, and this is where things start becoming really useful for you, the person trying to get more money. So basically, the two main types of programs are deemed, and this is an equipment-based program. So rather than calculating savings, they are assumed based on large national or statewide averages. And it makes the programs really, really simple. You say, I'm installing a 20 horsepower VFD, and the utility, you just send in the receipt from the project and the cut sheets, and the utility will send you money per horsepower. And sometimes they'll come and check that it's installed, and sometimes they won't. Same thing for lights, same thing for motors. Basically, it's just equipment, and they're really easy. You send cut sheets and receipts, and the utility sends you money. The simplest, fastest, easiest possible type of program, and all utilities that have efficiency programs have a deemed program. The quick language for you to know is that this is called a rebate, not an incentive. So rebates are easy, but generally they're lower dollars, and they have huge holes in them. So a lot of VFD rebates are for supply fans, but not for cooling tower fans and stuff like that. So again, that's a result of this incredibly negotiated process. And basically, if you can get a rebate, it's fast, but it will be low dollars, and a lot of times what you want to do is not in the rebate. The other type of program is a custom program. And so these are all kind of the same in that you give calculations as to savings you're going to get, and then there's a set rate that the utility will give you an incentive for the kilowatt hours you save annually, for the kW you take off peak, and for the therms. And the range is pretty big, and sometimes it's different for lighting than it is for motors, but for the most part it's like 8 or 9 cents a kilowatt hour for annual electricity, 50 to 150 bucks for kW you take off peak, and then pretty much across the country everyone agrees that it should be $1 per therm you save for natural gas. So the benefits of this program is that you can do a lot more stuff with it. So there is no building management system in deemed savings. So if you go to get a rebate, there will not be a rebate for a building management system. But if you use that BMS to turn off, say, a pump, all of a sudden you can get a huge rebate for your BMS. So all you need to do is call your account manager to let them know you're thinking about installing this. They'll tell you to start the application process. And then you have to get that in and approved before you do the project. So once you've installed the BMS, it is too late to then get incentives for it. But because that would make your project a free rider because you would have done it without the utility, which means it does not create incremental savings. But assuming you have submitted your application, then you work with either the utility directly or the third-party engineering company to agree on the calculations for savings. And my apologies, we're right in downtown San Francisco, and it's apparently exciting outside. But anyways, you can use data loggers to get incentives pretty quickly. So all you need to do is log amps for a few weeks before you install the building management system, and then you know how much energy you're going to save when you turn off those pumps. Because this is an onset presentation, I thought I would mention a few tools onset makes that are very helpful. So they make motor loggers, they make occupancy sensors, they make data loggers that can measure basically anything you put into an external channel, like amps. And this is how you get data. And third-party companies, utilities directly, everyone loves seeing data that you've actually logged in the field. That holds up incredibly well under scrutiny from any later audits. So if you are providing people with actual logged data, they will feel very protected and happy. And again, even if you can get a rebate for something, you might be much better off with the custom incentive. So installing a motion sensor might carry a rebate of $10, but if you for that, that's not part of the regular process. Everything I've said with regards to rebates versus custom incentives is true not just of California. This is the way almost all efficiency programs work throughout the country. Is there's both a deemed rebate you can get that has a list of equipment, and then there's some sort of custom program. What the custom program is called ranges, and what the rates are ranges, but generally speaking, you need to apply ahead of time. And you agree on calculated savings, and then once that is agreed, you do the project, and then once the project is done, the utility will verify that you have installed the equipment you agreed on, and then they give you the incentive. It's not really M&V based in terms of actually looking at utility bills. It's based, the measurement and verification is based on the fact that the equipment is there and that you agreed on the calculations ahead of time. For custom projects, how are custom calculators handled and intellectual property of the firm doing those calculations? That's actually a big problem. So utilities reasonably need to see the calculations you're doing in order to agree with them. On the other hand, if you are, say, Trane and have developed $10 million worth of software that can predict the energy use of your exact compressors, you're not exactly going to hand that over to an organization which may be required to disclose it publicly. So I would say that's a negotiated project on a per utility basis. Some utilities will offer to do their own calculations if you give them the data to do it. So generally speaking, at Carbon Lighthouse, what we do is whatever engineering, third-party engineering firm we're working with or utility we're working with, we tell them the results of our calculations and then give them all of the data and the inputs they would need to do it themselves. This isn't really a written policy, but the way it works out is once you've done that a bunch of times and they have seen your calculations are accurate, the scrutiny drops off a little bit. So as long as you're transparent about the underlying data, generally you're okay. Let's see, there's a lot more questions here. What is the best way to apply for a custom steam boiler incentive? Cool. So generally you should call your account manager and ask if they have a custom retrofit program. They probably will, and that will probably be the best thing you can do for a steam boiler. If you're lucky, there will be a deemed rebate for boilers, but that will be, generally speaking, much less than you would get if you actually calculated the savings, unless you are replacing a boiler that has very low run hours. So if you're replacing a boiler in Houston, you might be okay with the deemed savings rebate. But if you're in Minnesota, you would want to do custom calculations. A lot of the utilities pull deemed savings from national databases, so pay attention to where you are with regards to weather. If you expect there will be more savings from your project than a national average, you're often better off applying through the custom program. For scheduling purposes, how long do you expect to continue? That's a great question. How about no more than 10 minutes? And my apologies for running late. I'm going to read a couple more of the questions. For complicated projects, who writes the M&V plan? Again, there's not really M&V the way an individual customer might think of it, namely, are the savings real? The M&V is, did we agree on the calculations ahead of time, and was the equipment installed? It's extremely rare for a utility or third-party program to go through and look at interval meter data and actually calculate savings from that. If you really can't agree on calculations, you could propose that as the plan, and your utility may be open to that. But generally speaking, once you agree on calculations up front, M&V is just making sure you installed the equipment you said you were going to. All right, we're going to move on so I can hit my 10-minute promise here. More on different ways you can get more incentives for time clocks or building management systems. Digital time clocks and other DDC components usually are not in rebate programs. But if you can calculate how much energy you're going to save, you can get large custom incentives for them. Economizers, supplier resets, any sort of controls-based measure really won't be in deemed rebates at all. Like, there's no way to install a control board that can enable a supplier reset and expect $80 per horsepower. That doesn't exist. So you really need to do calculations to calculate how much energy you're going to save and agree on those with the utility ahead of time. If you want to know how to do those calculations, by the way, we previously gave a webinar on how to calculate savings from these exact measures and a whole bunch more. So you can scan through the Onset website and see that. Okay, we'll definitely hit my 10-minute promise here. So in conclusion, it's really important to remember who you are talking to and what their goal is. If you have a whole lot of questions you don't know the answer to, you want to talk to your account manager at the utility. And that's true whether you are a customer or an efficiency company. The account manager wants to hit their goals. They want to be helpful. So talking to them about projects, they want to figure out how to make those projects work. Third-party efficiency review companies is who you want to be a little more careful with, because these are hourly people paid to catch problems. So generally, you want to direct your large open questions to your account manager, and you want to direct your engineering calculations to your third-party review firm. Key thing here is don't be afraid to ask what would make someone's life easier. Third-party review firms, a lot of times they are suspicious because they are not getting data. So if you just give them data, then they can go through and do calculations, be like, gee, these guys are being conservative. We actually think they'll save more energy and their incentive should be higher. So whoever you're talking to, you should just ask what would make your life easy. This is a complicated ecosystem, and you can just ask. And it's often different for the person than it is for the firm. So the person, what might make their life easier is, I'm managing 45 projects right now. I don't want to go out to site for all of them and take pictures. Do you happen to have pictures? And then if you just send pictures, you'll have bought yourself a lot of goodwill. And that's different than their firm's concerns. So be specific. Ask what will make someone's life easier, what will make the project smoother, and what would be better for them and their firm directly. What will never steer you wrong is data and transparent calculations. So the more data you have and can give, the more cut sheets you have and can give, the more you can explain your calculations and share those, the more you can just pass your spreadsheet around, the easier everyone's life will be. So this is true whether it's a utility, a third-party program, an engineering review company. It doesn't matter. As long as you have data, which you can get from data loggers really quickly and easily, you're going to be in much better shape. So data and pictures are what absolutely everyone wants. So with that, you can stay on the line if you would like to hear me answer any more questions that come in, or alternatively, we are done. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoy a much time-reduced incentive process moving forward. Contact info to follow up with. Yes, I can provide that. Here we go. So this has my contact information at the top. Feel free to email me. If you want data loggers, get in touch with Onset. And they're always has access to the deemed rebates, and so that's just the rebate list. And then there are special direct install programs for like restaurants and like a small gym or something. I worked for NYSERDA in New York, which is a state agency. So if you are wondering where my background is in New York, it was from handing out rebates as part of a state agency.
Brenden, one person asked about the previous webinar that you presented, and that is on the Cognex website, onsetcomp.com, and if you go to the Learning section and then select On-Demand Webinars and scroll down a little bit, you can find the presentation there. It's how property managers can reduce energy costs and look great to building owners. Is that the presentation you were referring to earlier, Brenden?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
actually,
on our website.
Yeah, I believe I am mistaken. Most of the direct calculation methods were actually in a white paper published on Onset's website, not in the presentation you just referenced.
Okay, well, we do have the white papers. Again, under the Learnings navigation, just select white papers. And I believe it's posted out there. Let's see if I can find the name of it. It's do you recall the name?
Yeah, I think it was called something like Beyond Economizers, how to calculate other savings.
Yes, so I believe that's posted, and if it's not, I will forward a link to it to everybody in the follow-up email.
Okay, great. And with that, I think we are beyond my 10-minute promise here, so thank you all very much for your time. Please feel free to direct further questions to me or Onset, and I hope this was helpful.